A massive thank you to the Rams Heritage Trust for providing all of the memorabilia for this episode of Blue Canoe. This episode is sponsored by Art of Football. If you like scarves, gilets or football tops, get down to Art of Football in the heart of Notts.
Produce something then. Webster, Davis, McGOVERN. Well, I really don't think you could ask for a better goal to start the season with than that.
5 minutes into the game, scores his first league goal of the season, as easy as cracking a nut. Yes! Cosby double! That was as good a goal as you'll see this season.
You sexy thing,
with this kick.
sexy thing, you. I believe in miracles.
Short. And he scored!
This is your
Ken Burns has got the equaliser.
You sexy thing.
1-1. Oh well.
Where did you come from, baby?
If someone backed him up and filled in, there were no holes left for the opposition to come through.
Look how McGOVERN has gone with him.
My name's Aaron Lodge. Most people know me as Bodge. And this afternoon, we're joined by John McGOVERN, two-time second division winner, two-time first division winner, two-time European Cup winner. Is the good lady all right with this amount of two-timing, John, throughout the...
If you got the 2 League Cups.
And 2 League Cups as well. That's it.
No, she's put up with me for long enough, so I think all my faults are ironed out by her, over the years we've spent together. So.
And I can imagine that there's a spot in your house that's dedicated purely to all of this kind of stuff that you can see behind us.
Well, it's quite strange, really, because I had someone that came in our house for dinner, a friend of ours, the other day, and they were looking around and they were saying, "Where's all the football memorabilia?"
Yeah.
And I said, my good lady's pictures are on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mine are in the hallway.
Yeah.
I said, there's no room for football memorabilia. There's one picture, I think. I've got one picture of the Forest team, including Jimmy Gordon, Brian Clough and Peter Taylor, and it's signed by everybody.
Fantastic.
That's the only thing, and that's actually in my kitchen. So there's one football piece of memorabilia
little shrine
in my house, because I've lived the dream for a long time, enjoyed every single minute of it. Probably better than most players, wanted to be first out on the training ground, last to leave, So I've had a fantastic career, but I don't. If anybody comes around to our house, I don't want them bombarded with, my history.
Yeah, yeah. This is it. Try and keep it slightly. Yeah.
Well, I think it's been polite,
Definitely. So on Sunday, you was at the City Ground because you're an ambassador. Finished 1-0. Must have made you slightly happy based on maybe some of the history that goes alongside your time at Leeds United.
Well, I played at Hartlepool United, I played at Derby County, played at Nottingham Forest, played at Bolton Wanderers as player manager. But when I went to Leeds, I wasn't expecting the kind of abuse that I received as soon as I arrived at the ground. I mean, when you run out to make your debut and you're booed by the home fans before you've kicked a ball, it's a little bit difficult to understand. And then as the match starts, your teammates are playing your hospital balls, which... You don't need me to explain that. They're playing you a ball that favours the defender. And then occasionally somebody will say, "Oh, but he didn't mean it." When it happened about 6 times in a row.
You start getting the idea that maybe they're not that fussed.
And then it's a little bit difficult to take. And all you can do is kind of erase it from your memory once it's finished. Hope that you can go somewhere to get away with it, which eventually I did at Leeds United because I went to Nottingham Forest. And then you realise that if your kind of dedication is strong enough and your will is strong enough, that you can turn things around. So every time I go back to Elland Road now, you know, I wear my European Cup winners tie because they've never seen one of those.
And the way things are going, mate, I don't think it's going to be anytime soon either. And as you know, I'm a Derby fan, and I take great pleasure in being able to say that as well. So,
Well, I mean, I had a fantastic time at Derby. I mean, I'd met Messrs. Clough and Taylor. Was a little bit astounded by them as a 16-year-old at Hartlepool. So when they actually brought me down to Derby, it was almost hitting the big time. And then eventually, once we'd won the second division championship, it was in the big time.
yeah.
But I'd kind of served my apprenticeship, if you like, at Hartlepool. Where I'd
Played 72 appearances for Hartlepool's.
Yeah, got my debut as a 16-year-old while I was still at school, but was pleased that I was part of the promotion team that Clough and Taylor put together. So I enjoyed that because it was Hartlepool's first promotion in the club's history.
Yeah.
They've obviously repeated it since, but to be something that's the first part of a club's football history is really enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I will call it an apprenticeship, being in the lower leagues. When you become a footballer, you're not quite sure where the adventure is going to take you. But I was fortunate that Messrs. Clough and Taylor, probably Peter Taylor more than Brian Clough, because he was always the one that spotted a player and said, let's get him. At all the clubs I went to, that was quite well known that Peter Taylor's the one that's the recruitment officer, he'd be called now, in the modern game. But the best quote that I had when I was at Hartlepool was in the local paper, where Peter Taylor supposedly said to Brian Clough, lock the doors of the ground and don't open them till we sign that skinny kid playing it outside right in a trial match. So no, I know the skinny kid was me. I like to say I'm still skinny now.
Yeah.
But that was a fantastic statement to make about somebody just seen playing in a trial match. But obviously Peter Taylor was very shrewd at spotting, you know, a little bit of talent. And after that, obviously, when I signed for Hartlepool and got in the first team at 16 years of age, you know, while I was still at school, it was the dream has been fulfilled to a certain degree, because just the dream of being a footballer is.
And I can imagine it's a lovely feeling to go back to school on a Monday, knowing that you'd made your first team debut for locally, because you were actually born in Montrose, weren't you, in Scotland?
Yeah, Montrose on the East Coast, yeah.
And then you moved to Hartlepool when you were 11 years old? 6 years old. Sorry.
Yeah, I was kind of 6 going on 7 years of age when I moved to Hartlepool. We'd moved down because my dad needed to find work. There was none in Scotland, so the ironic thing about me moving down to be with our dad was that, you know, he eventually ended up working in a place called Accra in Ghana, in Africa. And he worked there on a project called the Kariba Dam project, which was obviously to provide water for the people of Accra, you know, and it was a massive project, so he didn't come home for over 2 years. And then he was killed the last day he was coming home in an accident at his work.
Really?
Which hit, obviously, the family. And myself, I got over it, but it was difficult to get over it, I suppose, at a young age, you know. But life goes on and you have to get on with it.
And I suppose as a boy in that family, you have to step up and become a man much younger maybe than some other people do. And
well, I mean, I was my sister was like, you know, she was older than me. My brother was older than me, and being the youngest, you know, you've always got to fight for everything. Yeah. That's natural in families. Yeah. But the strange thing about my dad dying was that my mum wanted me and my dad wanted me to go to university. You know, you wanted to give me an education. You know, we're working class people, right? We've got nothing. But they wanted one of the children, you know, to go to university and really do something, you know, make a career, a successful career. But obviously when my dad passed away, my grandmother was down from Scotland visiting, and she actually helped persuade my mum to let me sign for Hartlepool and the manager Brian Clough, because Mr. Clough.
Did he speak to your grandma? Did he?
Yeah, he spoke to my grandmother.
Of course
he charmed her. And, you know, and he was brilliant with the ladies, you know.
Yeah.
So he charmed my grandmother. she said to my mother, "Why don't you let him do what he wants to do?" You know? And that literally turned the tide of events regarding my hopeful career about being a footballer. And then it just took off, and obviously I did all the things that you need to do as a young footballer. You dedicate yourself, you love what you're doing, and you can't wait for the next kickabout, the next training session, or the next match.
Yeah.
And it's a feeling that didn't really leave me till I finished playing altogether.
Every single time you put a football shirt on.
I was in love with the game. So, somebody said I would have played for nothing, you know. I said, well, if you were at Hartlepool on the wages I was on.
It was close too.
Yeah, you're close to that.
Yeah.
So, but I had to wait till we sort of, you know, won European Cups at Nottingham Forest, and then my wages began to increase.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say out of proportion, you know, because an average Premier League player now earns more in 1 week than I earned in 15 years. And I've got all the contracts to prove.
Yeah. And the trophies that might have something to say. Yeah. So during your time at Hartlepool, you ended up winning promotion from the 4th Division, which you count as one of your greatest achievements in football, even after all of the European Cups and the league titles that you won. And this was the season after Brian Clough had left Hartlepool. So did you have an idea of which way your career was about to start going? Was the...
Well, I'm still a relative youngster. And obviously the new manager that took over from Brian Clough had a grudge. I'm not sure whether it was against Clough or myself, because as a youngster, I wasn't sure why he had a grudge against me, but you know, it didn't seem that I could do anything right. You know, I can't head the ball, he would say. You know, you can't shoot. You know, you don't score goals. You don't go past people. You know, and if he'd have looked a little bit deeper and saw that, you know, when I was in control of the ball, I could pass it with both feet or cross it with both feet, and I was very accurate with my passing. But obviously, there was something that he had a bug up his backside about, because you know, he did pick on me, but I managed to play regardless.
Yeah.
And I think he found out, you know, when I kept in the side and we won promotion, that, you know, those two things there has to be a common ground there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't the greatest. The achievement at Hartlepool's United, they were called at that time.
When did they drop the S? Because when you look on old programmes, it says Hartlepool's, and then when you hear Jeff Stelling talking about it nowadays, because that's his football team, it is Hartlepool without the S. Like, when did they end up?
Yeah, they changed it, I think, a couple of times. You know?
Yeah.
But you know, and the reason I think originally it was Hartlepool's is because there's the main town centre. There's a place called the Central Estate, and then there's the old fishing port. So you do have 3 separate entities there.
Bits and bobs of...
But together you call them Hartlepool's United.
Hartlepool's, yeah.
You know, because there's 3 different areas altogether. But, you know, whether it was Hartlepool or Hartlepool's, you know, just to do something for the first time in a club's history, I think it's a real boost. You know, it certainly was for the town.
Especially when they are in the 4th Division, and as you say, you come from a working class background, and seeing how happy that must have made people that have never experienced success like that, must have really spurred you on in that sense.
Well, to be fair, a couple of years before Clough joined, I think they'd applied for re-election for the 6th year in a row.
Really?
To get back into the league.
Yeah. And
the year that they didn't have to apply for re-election, they got a civic reception.
Yeah.
So you've gone from getting a civic reception for not applying for re-election into the Football League.
Yeah.
And then 2 or 3 years later, you've gone up a division.
Yeah.
So it was changing times for Hartlepool at the time.
Yeah. And, first memory of meeting Brian Clough around that time. Is there something that really sticks out?
Yeah, absolutely. Stood in a line with the other boys on trial. it's the late 60s, so the Rolling Stones and the Beatles are the two top bands in the country. I've grown my hair long because I thought Mick Jagger was a magnificent performer, and I wouldn't mind repeating what he was doing if it was possible.
Yeah.
So when I was introduced to him, we've got a line of boys who've got short back and sides, and you've got me at the end, you know, that doesn't quite fit in, you know. So Clough went along and shook the hands with everybody else, gets to me and, you know, stand up straight, get your shoulders back and get your hair cut. You look like a girl. You know, and I'm like 15 and I've gone, what did I do to him?
Yeah.
You know, but that was it. And I went home and my mum said, how did training go, son? And I said, I ain't going back there, mum. The bogeyman's arrived, you know.
That's it, I'm done.
Yeah, but I did pluck up courage and I did go back. And then I realised in the first match I played for him that he was wise, obviously, in a football sense, and I wasn't. And I played it outside right, and I didn't have a particularly outstanding debut. But then when we came in for the training session on the Monday, you know, he said, get a football and bring it here, you know. I said, well, what do you want me to do with it, boss? You know, he said, what I would like you to do is dribble that ball round the corner flag and back as fast as you can. So off I went with the ball at my feet, words of encouragement ringing in my ears. And my grandmother runs faster than you, McGOVERN. I came back to him and said, was that okay, boss? He said, now what I would like you to do is dribble the ball, is run round the corner flag and back without the ball. I said, okay, boss. So I ran around the corner flag, came back to him and he said, now tell me what was easier, running with the ball or without the ball? So obviously I said, running without it, you know, and he said, well, why don't you try passing it on a Saturday then? And it's a simple statement.
Yeah.
Pep Guardiola at Manchester City thinks he invented tiki-taka football. It's the correct way to play the game. You get the ball and you give it to one of your own teammates who's closer to the opposition goal as soon as you can.
And then you get on your bike, basically.
And then you can run off the ball far more easily than actually trying to dribble the ball, look to see where the opposition are. So it was a lesson and it stuck with me immediately. And I thought, no, that's how you should do it.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have to do it with a little finesse where you pass it at the right pace to whoever wants to receive it. Pass it on the right side of a defender to make him favourite. And obviously, you pass it at the right time for him to benefit getting an early ball.
I think when you look at players like Roy Keane in the slightly more modern era, he seemed to take that same mantra on. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's the way that football's played at the top level. You know, all the teams through the ages. You know, pass it, pass and move, pass and move, pass and move. You pass it because the guy that's receiving the ball from you needs time to do what he wants to do with it. So if you keep knocking the ball just in front of you and go closer and closer to him, what are you going to do? Eventually give it to him. I mean, the defender's had time to make sure he's
think
in a
about
perfect
what he
position.
wants to do, and
you know, and he doesn't want that. He wants the ball quickly before the defence can get set up against him, so he controls it and then does what he wants to do. So it's players that keep the ball and run with them all the time. It's a bit selfish in some ways. I mean, obviously, once you get into the last third of the opposition's half of the field, then it's the individual players with the talent and skill to go past people are needed, because obviously it's easier to defend than it is to attack.
Yeah.
But the whole concept of football as a game is give it to him quickly and give him the time to do what he wants to do with it.
During your time as a footballer, but were you always outside right? Because that's like a slightly dated way of talking about a position, but back in the day, that's how you used to describe it.
The reason I played it outside right was obviously when I made my debut for Central Park in Hartlepool's Church League Division 2. They put me outside right because I was like 15 and it's an under-18 league, which means some of the players were like 18 and you see me here, I'm not the biggest of people. So when I was that age, of course, if I turned sideways, you couldn't see me. So they did put me outside right, I think, to save me suffering from some of the physical challenges that would go on in those days.
Yeah.
And then eventually at Hartlepool, because I had the ability to pass the ball with both feet, they could have played me outside left. It wouldn't have mattered. But obviously out there, you've got a little more space and it gives you a little more time. So if you're inexperienced, you really appreciate that extra little bit of time. Because eventually, when I went down to Derby County and Peter Taylor suggested that I go and play central midfield, because even when I was at Derby and we won the league, you know, I'd started off as an outside right.
This being the first division or the second division?
Second division.
Second division. So 1968-69 when you first...
Yep.
Did you win it in your first season that you signed for Derby, or was it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did. I mean, I went up from the 4th to like the 1st in 2 seasons, literally.
Yeah.
You know, because we'd won promotion. Then I went straight to Derby after that and they won promotion. So I'd like made 2 promotions in double quick time.
Yeah. You met Brian Clough in the post house in San Diego. And was that when you were signing for Derby County? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Apparently the conversation lasted about 10 seconds.
Well, I mean, after the way I'd been treated at Leeds, you know, when I went to Forest, there was no arguments over contracts or anything, but there was never any arguments over contracts. If I sit down at Derby with Brian Clough, you know, I mean, he just used to say, "You should be paying us to join this club." And actually, if you saw my wages, you know, I wasn't far off that actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, listen, I didn't worry about money. There's a contract, he'd say, get it signed, you know, and I would sign it.
Yeah.
And then I would do my best to try and get in the first team, where you do earn a little bit of appearance money, and then you get bonuses for winning matches. So,
did you have goal bonuses? Was that goal bonuses? Was it
No.
whether no?
no, that's idiotic if you have goal bonuses, because you're going to get people that, you know, have got someone in a far better position to them, and they're going to try and score.
Yeah.
You know, so goal bonuses are idiotic.
Yeah.
You know, stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't create a team element about it, does it?
Clough went one step further when it came to bonuses, because he used to say, especially when we're at Nottingham Forest, I'm not paying you any bonuses unless you're in the top 10. Because if you're below the top 10, nobody will come and watch you play.
Well, this is it, yeah.
So while it sounds a bit hard on the players not getting a win bonus or a draw bonus, if you think about it, it's perfect financial common sense.
Yeah.
If you're not in the top 10, you know, we won't get a decent crowd. So, you know, we're not going to pay you anything unless you get in the top 10. But if you get in the top 10, then you get in the top 5, and then you get in the top 2, I'll give you a little bit more.
Yeah.
So everything's an incentive to do better and get results, which you'd rather get bonuses all the time regardless, but we were a good side.
Yeah.
So we got the bonuses.
And that side that was created at Derby County, from winning the second division and then the 4 years that then followed that afterwards. Just talk to us about what your first impressions of Derby were like. And
well, I mean, obviously I went down to Derby and I was in digs. So it's the first time I'd ever been in digs. Obviously my mum's still living, you know, up in Hartlepool with my brother and my sister. So I was in digs down at Derby.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to my personal effects, I like to keep them personal effects. But I found in the digs other people were touching my possessions without asking me.
Yeah.
So I then had a word with Peter Taylor, and he put me in a digs where there was just literally me and the landlord and landlady and nobody else, which suited me down to the ground. But eventually, as I said, my mum moved down. She was a widow, so she had memories of my dad in Hartlepool. Wanted to forget that, so she decided to move down to Derby with me. Yeah. So she moved down, we got a house, and obviously my brother, he's moved down with me. My sister had shot off to America, got married an American, and was living in San Francisco. So, you know, we got down to Derby, and it's like there's a new home for my brother, my mum and myself. So
when we did an interview with John O'Hare, he said that he'd never seen somewhere so industrial in all his life, but then when he came to Derby, and he'd lived about 15 miles away from Glasgow, and he said Siddle's Road was yellow from the dye factories, and he didn't know what he'd walked into, basically. He was thinking that Brian Clough was obviously the sticking point for coming to Derby, but it's like he just got married as well, and his wife was thinking, what was going off here? Was there anything like that with you before?
Well, your career, you know, rules what you have to do. You know, but if I was fortunate, you know, my dad wasn't around, so my mum moved down to Derby, so that I could, instead of staying in digs, I'm actually at home. So you feel more relaxed. You know, you enjoy it more. The family's there, and it's, again, it was a big step for my mum, you know, because she's on her own. But thankfully, when she moved down to Derby, she met someone and got married again, and really enjoyed life, you know, which she fully deserved, you know. And I was absolutely delighted that happened for her, you know, and she had a fantastic wedding. And as I said, really enjoyed life. Went to America to see her daughter, my sister, and had a lot of trips where she, you know, just really enjoyed life, instead of, you know, being a widow at a young age and looking after 3 kids. I did pay her rent though. I did give her a contribution.
Yeah, good on you as well.
I don't know if anybody else, I don't know if my brother or my sister did to start with, but I did.
Yeah, this is it. You made your debut for Derby County at home at the baseball ground against Huddersfield. Just talk to us about your first impressions of the baseball ground, of what kind of atmospheres were created during your time when you were at Derby County.
Well, when I got in the side, obviously we're vying for promotion. In fact, we might have been near enough the top of the league. I can't remember if we were actually top. But
yeah. So it was March time, was it? You made your home debut. Was it already a portion of the way into the season by the time you broke into the first team? And
that's right.
Yeah.
But I was delighted, obviously, to get my chance. And with Brian Clough and Peter Taylor, you never know when it's coming. I mean, the switch I'd had from playing wide right to central midfield, and it was in the reserves, you know. And Peter Taylor was the one that said, you know, before I got in the side, he said, I've had a bad report about you in the reserves. And I said, bad report? I said, well, you'll have to tell me, because I don't understand what you're saying, you know. And he said, well, the reserve team coach said that, you know, you didn't get in the match, you know, when you... And I said, I'm stood outside right. I said, I'm told to stay there and run up and down. I said, I've run up and down for 90 minutes. I said, nobody's passed the ball to me. And this is where Peter Taylor said, well, would you fancy playing central midfield? And I thought, well, at least I can go and get the ball.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, yeah. You know, so, and obviously my ability to pass the ball with both feet meant that even though I didn't have a lot of time, I wouldn't lose possession of the ball. So again, Peter Taylor's, you know, solved the problem.
And did you feel more at home in that position as well? Did you feel like something clicked?
I felt, this is a cliche, I felt it was tailor-made for my ability. Sorry about that one. I felt it was tailor-made for my ability because of, you know, the ability to pass with both feet.
Yeah.
And if you look even at the modern Premier League players, there's a lot of them who've only got one good foot.
Yeah.
So it suited me down to the ground, and obviously it suited the team. And, you know, we had a left winger called Alan Hinton, and he was like our escape clause, you know.
Everything
if anybody's under pressure, get it out to Alan Hinton, because you know where he'll be, because he's told you stay out there and we'll get the ball to you. Then you can do your bit of magic.
Things in.
And of course, Alan Hinton was a great crosser of the ball, again with both feet. And he had one of the most powerful strikes of football in the game. So, you know, it suited me, and the side was already a good side. And I mean, I played with someone called Dave Mackay that was an inspiration, not just to me, but to the other players.
Yeah.
I mean, Dave showed me what attitude is all about as a professional footballer. You could play in a five-a-side. Dave will smash through you to get the ball. You can play in a friendly match.
Yeah.
Dave will smash you to get the ball.
Yeah.
You can play in an international match. Dave will smash, you know. Training session, Dave will smash you, you know. He played in a practice session with the first team at Derby, and Alan Hinton pushed the ball through his legs and shouted, nutmegs. And I just went, not a good move, Alan. You know. It was Alan Durban, actually, the midfield player. So 5 minutes later, Alan Durban missed 2 games that season. Not from getting injured in a match.
No, because he decided to be cheeky to Dave Mackay.
So
if he'd not said nutmegs, he might have got away with it.
Yeah. If he hadn't tried to take the mick, he would. You know. But that was it. And Dave showed me that if I can adopt this attitude, then you don't have to worry about the occasion. You know, it can be a cup semi-final, it can be the league deciding match, whatever it is. If you've got the right attitude as a professional, you keep that attitude in everything that you do, because you are a professional. If you're an amateur and you're not playing well, you can walk off the field, or you can pack in. You're a professional, you're paid to do your job.
Yeah.
And Dave taught me what it takes to go out there, and I acquired a similar attitude about performing as a professional footballer. But so Dave Mackay taught me that, and I was delighted to learn from him.
Yeah, and Dave Mackay obviously went on to win the 1975 league title with Derby County. How happy did that make you? Because you weren't actually a part of that team anymore. You'd moved on.
David sold me, but you know that was just part of the game. You know, you move on. Dave obviously wanted someone in there that could score more goals than I was probably going to get, so he signed Bruce Rioch to help Derby win the league, and they did. So you know, well done.
Yeah.
Listen, Dave was such a bubbly character, you know, and but he was always fair. He was always honest with me when he spoke to me. Because Brian Clough took over at Leeds and wanted to sign me there. I mean, you know, Dave didn't say, "Oh, you're not going there. I'm not letting you go." He let me go. So I had no arguments with Dave as a player or a manager, and a lot to thank him for. And I was delighted that when he died, his wife Isabel phoned me up and said, "I'd like you to be one of the pallbearers in Edinburgh."
Really?
Where I was in the company of the great Tottenham players, Pat Jennings, Cliff Jones. So for me, and I was delighted just to be asked to go there, and just to be there.
Yeah. And you had 6 wonderful seasons at Derby. There was the record attendance at the baseball ground against Tottenham, where you won 5-0. There's 43,000 in the ground.
I remember that one for sure. For sure, I remember that one. But I'm not sure if it was, but it might have been the first time I played against Jimmy Greaves. And he was a hero of mine.
Yeah.
And in those days, you run out, you don't walk out, and then you don't shake hands with the opposition before a game. You know, in fact, there was some of the opposition you wouldn't want to shake hands with before a game. And there's some of them you definitely don't shake hands with them at the end. But because they were playing Tottenham, I used to keep a scrapbook of Jimmy Greaves. I also kept one of Dennis Law. But when we play in Tottenham, I've got the scrapbook and it's got all the cuttings about him scoring goals, left, right and centre. So at the end of the match, I just wanted to shake his hand. Yeah. But of course, we're playing at the baseball ground. So it's like there's 6 inches of mud. But we're just beating them 5-0. So I ran over and shook hands with him. You know, and I was delighted, but I'm in the bath and I'm going. And the other lads are going, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm not shaking that. I'm not washing that." Shook hands with Jimmy Greaves tonight. And then I got back home that night and my mum went, "Get that bloody hand wash." You know. I said, "Mum, I've shaken, get that." I couldn't argue with my mum, so yeah. So it lasted a while, but I'd shaken hands with Jimmy Greaves, and then years and years later, I actually interviewed him in an after-dinner situation, and he was a really charming man then.
Yeah.
But I mean, everybody wants to be a goal scorer. You know, I realised I'm not going to be a goal scorer.
And he really was the pinnacle of English football around that time, wasn't he? There was, once again, John O'Hare referenced him as one of his idols, and
yeah,
there was plenty of players that aspired to be like Jimmy Greaves.
Well, I mean, you know, the goal scorers are always the heroes, aren't they? Mm-hmm. With the fans, and they're forgiven a little bit more if they miss one than other players if they miss.
A night like that where you were able to meet Jimmy Greaves at the baseball ground after winning 5-0. That was one for your own scrapbook, not even to reference Jimmy Greaves' scrapbook that you had of him. And there was a few results in and around them couple of seasons before we won the first division, where there was just them atmospheres that were created. There was a 4-0 win against Liverpool, I believe, where you managed to get a goal, and just talk to us about some of the matches you remember from the baseball ground that were
purely from an architectural point of view. The baseball ground was built with huge, very tall sides of the ground, and it was obviously your viewing area was superb, but when it was a night match and the floodlights were on, I don't think I've played in a better atmosphere
really
than a baseball ground full and an evening match under floodlights, because of the close proximity of the supporters and the stands, and it was just a magnificent atmosphere to play in. So it was inspiring. I think no more so than at Derby when we were in the the European Cup, as it was called, obviously nowadays Champions League, and we played teams like Benfica, and managed to beat them 3-0 at the baseball ground, and it was one of those games where
a certain John McGOVERN got the third as well.
I managed to get a goal. I managed to get a goal in that one. It must have been a blue moon that night for me to get a goal. But the strange thing was that Eusebio was playing for Benfica. Obviously, their star player, and he played. And funny enough, I met him many years after, and I was trying to show him where I'd had a fractured ankle, but they thought it was just a sprain, but I had a scar about that long, and then he rolled up his trouser leg, and he had one going from his knee to his ankle on one leg, and another scar that went from his other knee to his other ankle, you know what I mean? Yeah. Which made me go very, very quiet to show him my little scar after the surgery he'd had done to him. So, but he was he was
and what a legend he was as well.
I mean, he was like a world star.
Yeah,
a world star.
That World Cup in '66, where Portugal got to the semi-finals, and he was. I think he won the Golden Boot, or he came very close to winning it. I think Jeff Hurst.
But he, as you say, he was a world star. I'm not sure what he made of the baseball ground pitch, because he said to me, when we came in the morning, he said, to your baseball. I said, yeah. He said
it would look quiet.
He said the pitch was dry. He said, when we came to play the match, he said, there's puddles all over.
Yeah.
He said, there's no rain. So it was a Brian Clough trick. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Flood the pitch. We play well on a wet surface, and if you haven't got enough water, get the fire brigade in. We got the fire brigade in. And the pitch was flooded. But we won 3-0, and they weren't used to playing on that much mud, Benfica. So taken a little bit by surprise. I can remember the return leg in Lisbon, because we never got the ball out of our half, I don't think, till about an hour of the match. Yeah. They absolutely battered us.
Yeah.
They battered us, to be honest.
Finished 0-0 though.
Yeah, we were very resilient.
Yeah.
Everybody was, on the defensive side of the game, because we had to be. Yeah. We couldn't get our game plan in. It was like, we're up against it, we're in the trenches, and let's get on with it.
Was that the biggest game that you'd played to date as well, in terms of occasion and going abroad and
the opposition? Mm. And obviously the stadium, they played in a fantastic stadium. I've never played in one, so grand before.
Have they still got? Is it still a Stadio de Luz or so? Is that? I think
to be honest, I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But no, I mean they were absolute top quality, top liners. So
they'd won European Cups previous to you playing them, and I think they were second to Real Madrid when they were compared, weren't they, as a team? So,
but I mean the experience is just magnificent. I mean, you remember things. I mean, especially players like Eusebio, because you're talking about Eusebio, Pele, Messi, Cruyff, all top world class players, and he was certainly amongst them. So it was. I'm pleased I played against them.
Yeah. There was the games against Leeds United over the period that you were at Derby, and before you ended up following Brian Clough to Leeds, and he signed you there. where Brian Clough and Don Revie's rivalry really seemed to hit a certain height.
Well, obviously, I don't know many managers that would really get on with other managers because there's so much at stake.
Yeah.
You know, mainly the pride of winning a football match, which, you know, thousands of football spectators will tell you every weekend. There's nothing like winning a football match, and obviously, Clough and Revie's coming together was never ever sort of really amicable from, I think, either of them. As players, we would go out there and just try and win a game of football.
Yeah.
You know, there would have been a special atmosphere if we played Nottingham Forest when I'm at Derby, because it's a Derby match, you know, and it does mean a lot.
Did you sense that as well? Because I have heard people say that Derby and Leeds was almost a bigger rivalry than Derby and Forest. Did you know how much Derby and Forest didn't like each other, even in the time that you were playing for Derby?
Well, even when I first started playing football at Hartlepool, you know, we played against Darlington, you know, and it's a local derby.
Yeah.
So there's the extra interest.
Yeah.
You know, there's the extra atmosphere. There's the extra tough tackle that's going to come. But it was so frantic in those days that, you know, as soon as you got a ball, you had about 1 second to do something with it, or somebody came clattering into you. You know? But that was a derby match. It was like, you know, you had to have your Braveheart on when you went out for a local derby match.
How do you prepare for games like that? Is the
same as I did for every game? You know, try and get a decent night's sleep the night before. Although I didn't have any problem sleeping in those days. When you get to my age now, you got big problems trying to get to sleep. So yeah, you prepare normally, but you know, I played with Dave Mackay, so I knew exactly, you know, what my attitude should be, the same as it is for any game I played in. So I didn't put any, or the manager wouldn't put in any extra training or specialised team talks regarding the opposition.
You just knew what you needed to go and do. It spoke for itself, essentially.
Of course,
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, when you run out in front of thousands of people, you know, you don't need any motivation then.
No.
You know, you might need 1 or 2 words of wisdom told to you by the manager to remind you what to do in certain situations that can occur in a football match. But you've got your own experience and you've got your own thoughts on how you should play a football match. And I mean, against Leeds United, we know it's going to be a real tough game because they've got some real, you know, bone crunchers in their side, probably more than any other side. Because I think they did thrive on the physical side of the game. You know, other teams would thrive on the creative side of the game, you know. But because there was still a lot of tackling from behind in those days, you know, you had to be prepared for a real physical 90 minutes if that was going to be the output of the game. You don't know what a match is going to turn out like when you start it.
No.
And sometimes, you know, you've got to try and maybe stamp your authority on your opposite number because he'll try and do the same to you. So as long as you're switched on, you can get through it. And you just, like all the supporters, you just absolutely praying we can win this one.
The European Cup semi-final with Derby County against Juventus. It's obviously a lot of the controversy that surrounded that. Your take on it and
well, I couldn't.
How you felt as a player as well, having to deal with.
Well, the match over there initially was. I couldn't believe that a referee could be so biased. And it's the only game I ever played in football where I was nearly in tears at some of the decisions that he was making. First 2 players that got booked for Derby County, Roy McFarland and Archie Gamble. The only 2 players that had received cautions in previous matches, which mean they would miss the return leg.
Yeah.
And what did they do? Nothing. One of their players, I think, no, not one of their players, but at half time, I think they had a German, I don't know whether he was still playing or whether he was an advisor, called Helmut Aller, you know, and he's got his arm around the German referee as he walks into the referee's room. And
it's quite well documented as well.
Peter Taylor nearly got arrested for trying to break into the referee's room to tell them you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
But, you know, the result stood. The return, you know, we had 2 goals down. The return leg at Derby, we've got a penalty, I think, with about 15 minutes to go. And Alan Hinton, our normally very, very efficient penalty taker, missed one. So we might have had a 15-minute spell where, you know, we could have possibly got the game back.
Yeah,
but they
within
were,
1 goal, and you
Yeah,
go for
yeah.
the jugular kind of thing. In the
Yeah.
last, yeah.
But you know, it was one of those things that the referee, you know, listen, talk about being biased. You know, it was so obvious. They made it so obvious. That's the thing that annoyed me. Why do you make it so obvious that you're playing for the home team throughout the whole 90 minutes? And obviously, you can't speak to him or say anything, you know, because you know you're going to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah.
But you just realise, you know, there's thousands of people watching it. It's on television, and you're still showing everyone that you've cheated. How can that happen? How can that happen?
And that's tales of what could have been.
It's like playing the World Cup in Qatar in the summer.
Yeah.
How can you do that?
Yeah.
And then ruin all of European football? It happens.
So you left Derby County as a Division 1 winner. We've got the replica of the trophy there, mate. It was your goal against Liverpool in the last game of the season that basically meant that we'd won the league, although your team went over to Mallorca because you'd finished the season and had to wait on other results. And
Yeah, that's right. I think that Liverpool, if they could win at Arsenal, I think I hope I'm right on that. You know, they would overtake us. But the match against Liverpool, I mean, it was one of those matches where we had a right back. I think Ronnie Webster was injured.
Yeah.
And I think it was Ronnie Webster. And anyway, we're looking at a fullback, and Brian Clough gave a debut to 16-year-old right back in the semi-final of the European Cup, Steve Powell. So Steve Powell made his debut as a 16-year-old.
wow.
Against Steve Highway, one of the best wingers in the game. And yeah, we managed to win it 1-0. I mean, I scored a goal. I was in a strange position because I was actually almost falling backwards, but the reason that I was off balance was we'd built an attack on the right-hand side of the field. I'd come up in support as a midfield player just outside the penalty area. Alan Durbin, who scored a lot of goals for us from midfield, sort of ran past me towards the ball, and as it went to him, I thought he'll just shoot. But he didn't, because one of their defenders closed him down, and he kind of opened his legs and let the ball run through to me, which I wasn't expecting, because Alan Durbin near goal, he ain't going to pass it to you. He's going to shoot. But he didn't. He let it go. So I'm kind of out of step if I'm going to try and hit this one. So I had to kind of throw myself, get my toe under the ball, hit it with my instep, totally off balance.
Yeah.
And it flew in the top corner. So it was one of those where, I was still up there in support. We were attacking. But Alan Durbin dummied the ball when normally he would have tried to shot himself.
Yeah.
And I wasn't expecting it. But if it goes in, it goes in. And then
there you are.
I was reminded by the manager when I came off that, you know, that had no real importance in us having a chance to win the league.
Even though it was the last game of the season and you needed the 3 points. And,
I was told that.
Sounds very Cloughy, that does.
Well, he's just reminding me, you know, that you're not in the team to actually do that. But you know, I've had a night off and scored a goal. You know.
So you've gone over to Mallorca.
Yeah.
Apparently, was it Peter Taylor was trying to get round a radio that wasn't?
Well, they said they had a phone connection.
Yeah.
And they would obviously phone to let us know what the scores were. But there was a problem with the phone line, and he said, "I think, I think Liverpool have drawn or something, so we've won the league." He says, "I think," and then the line went dead. So we did. So we sat there, you know, with
having kittens,
a few beers, ready to celebrate, and
not really knowing what you
so
celebrated.
Yeah. It's the earliest I went to bed that night. You know, we're in Mallorca. winding down, you know, in a big way.
Yeah.
But that's the earliest I went to bed. And then we only knew we'd won the next morning because there was about 300 photographers.
What, come to the hotel
in the reception area of the hotel and round by the pool, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, one of them kept annoying us by taking too many pictures, you know, so we threw him in the pool. And his camera.
Yeah.
But he
That's
was a very impolite and obnoxious cameraman, so he deserved everything that he got.
Yeah.
But that was it. We'd won and we celebrated out there.
Yeah.
And
I can imagine Derby was a fun place to be when you came back, and
obviously it's great to come back and celebrate with the fans. You know?
Yeah.
Because usually every match you play, you can celebrate with the fans at the end of it if you've achieved anything or even won the match.
Yeah.
But you know, this being such a massive trophy, it was great to get back and then, you know, have things like civic receptions, you know, where you do celebrate with the fans.
Was it open top bus as well that went through Derby, I believe, was it?
To be honest, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But it was just a great day, obviously, in the history of the club. It was a great day for me.
Yeah.
It's my first major kind of triumph in football, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I'd won second division championship with Derby, but to win the first division championship, wow, you know, incredible achievement.
At what age as well? 24, 25?
No, at that time, I think I was about 21 or something.
Really?
Like that.
Yeah. As early as that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I was 21.
Yeah.
But just pleased to be part of it all. Still being taught humility lessons by the manager, but strange for him to teach humility lessons. Obviously, he didn't have someone teaching him them. You know?
No, God's boss. You played 190 times for Derby before you ended up going and joining the same manager that you'd worked under, which was Brian Clough. And it wasn't a particularly brilliant time for you as a footballer going to Leeds United. There'd been a lot of history previous with Brian Clough and Don Revie, and when Brian Clough went there. Did you see it as a strange decision when he decided to take that job? Because he was supposed to go down to Brighton, I believe, with Peter Taylor, and then Leeds kind of came in and swooped him last minute. And
yeah, obviously, I mean, when he asked me to go and work for him at Leeds, I automatically thought, well, Peter Taylor would be joining him, but obviously he didn't, because he'd given his word, I think, to the chairman at Brighton that I will not walk out on you this season. So Brian Clough was on his own. Managing Leeds United, and obviously I was happy to work for him because, you know, I'd done it for two previous clubs and they'd been successful, so I didn't see the problem. And the only thing I was a bit concerned about was a quote from one of the Leeds players saying the manager on his first meeting with us told us to throw our medals in the bin because we cheated to win them. And I asked Norman Hunter actually if that was true, and he said, yeah, that's true, that's exactly what he said, you know. And I said, Norman, why don't you give me a phone call? Tell me.
just maybe let me know.
You know, let me know, and I wouldn't have bothered coming here. Then, when I get through all the abuse I had at Leeds, you know, and then go back there as a Forest player, you know, knock them out the League Cup, and, you know, win the league at Forest, everything pales into insignificance about
that little period of
the
time
abuse that I had, you know, when I was there.
And I can imagine it's only motivation when you end up going back to Elland Road as a Forest player. And I think I remember seeing an interview where you'd said Brian Clough got a £90,000 payout and a new Mercedes, and you was kind of stuck there at Leeds United waiting on a phone call, basically, to say.
There was one or two other clubs that wanted to sign me. Alan Ashman, the manager of Carlisle, had made an offer, and I was told, oh, you can speak to him. And then John Bond at Norwich City had made an offer. So Leeds said, oh, you can speak to him. I said I could speak to anybody about leaving the club. You know,
was that quite open as well? Like, if you knew how much.
Oh, dear me, you know. But I got a phone call from somebody else saying, don't do anything at the moment with either Carlisle or Norwich, because Mr. Clough might be interested, because he could be in the running for a job.
Yeah.
And obviously, eventually, you know, he took over at Nottingham Forest, you know, made an offer that was very readily accepted. So I left Leeds and went down to join them at Nottingham Forest. And my good lady Anne, who I've been with for a zillion years, I think, she said to me, "Don't take a drop in wages." She said, "You're not entitled to take a drop in wages going to Forest from Leeds." So with that in mind, I met Brian Clough at the post house at Sandy Acre. Negotiations over the contract lasted for 45 minutes. I took a 30 quid drop in wages and got the biggest rollicking from my other half and got through the door.
Yeah, if that isn't motivation to...
I just said to her, "Look, forget about the money. I said, I'm doing something that I'll enjoy doing again." And obviously, I was quite happy. The wages didn't bother me anyway.
Yeah.
Never did. I've never been motivated by money alone.
Did you receive any similar, not abuse, but did you know how big the rivalry was between the two clubs? Obviously, you played in Derby Forest matches. Was there ever a thought of loyalty to Derby at that time? And not loyalty, because it's business at the end of the day, but did you know you might experience some form of...
Well, no, but you look forward to them, because the Derby matches were more exciting. They're more talked about, more discussed by the fans. There's a lot more pride if you win a Derby match than there is of beating anybody.
Yeah, you don't have to tell us. There's a couple of mates.
So it's it's an easy one. I'm back at Forest. We're going to be playing in a Derby match. So I was delighted from that aspect, as well as obviously getting away from Leeds United. So obviously when we do play Derby matches, strangely enough, when I was at Forest, or was it? No. See, this is a long time ago. No, I can remember winning a match at Nottingham Forest when I was playing for Derby.
Yeah.
And Frank Wignall, who had played for Nottingham Forest as well, was playing for Derby. And he kind of shielded a ball, and eventually I got near him and he passed it to me, and I scored, and it went in the top corner, and we won that one by about 4 goals, I think. But it was strange because Frank's playing for Derby, I'm playing for Derby, and then Frank had played for Forest, and I end up playing for Forest, obviously, years later. Scoring in a derby's an extra special bonus. Winning the derby's a bonus, but if you score in it as well, it's an extra special bonus. Yeah. And just part of the enjoyment of being a professional footballer, that you get involved in matches like this, because a lot of players go through their careers and win absolutely nothing, despite some of them having bags and bags of ability. I had a certain amount of ability. I thought I applied myself 100%. I certainly never gave less than 100% effort when I went out on a football field.
You won 2 League Cups with Nottingham Forest. You won the 2nd Division with Nottingham Forest. And this was around the time, once again, Clough was building a team that was in the 2nd Division and taking them through the positions into the 1st Division. You then win the league, 1st Division, and qualify for Europe and draw Liverpool in the first round, who had won 2 European Cups previous years.
Yeah.
They were going for their 3rd European Cup.
Yeah.
And you managed to knock them out, which was a brilliant way to start that European Cup run.
It was quite funny, really, because in those days they made the draw was on the radio, and the manager would get a radio after you'd finished training, and we'd all sit around the radio waiting to hear what the draw was.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, a couple of players are saying, "Oh, I want to go to Germany." Another couple are saying, "No, I want to go to Spain." And somebody, "No, I want to go to Greece." And then we draw Liverpool, and we go, "We're not even going out the country. We thought it was the European Cup." So it's like, oh,
yeah.
But the manager, as usual, with a few words of wisdom, said, "Just remember, they will not be happy with the draw." He said, "They will not be happy they've drawn us." He says, "And they'll worry about us. You do your job, you do your job, and you do your job. They will worry about us."
And you'd added players to that squad that had really bolstered it. The first £1 million signing, was it, in that season?
Well, yeah. After we'd won promotion, we signed Peter Shilton, Archie Gemmell, and Kenny Burns. You know, wow.
Two out of 3 Derby ain't bad, is it?
Talk about improving the side.
Yeah.
And then we signed, as you mentioned, the first £1 million player, Trevor Francis, who was like, you know, Grease Lightning, was always going to get you goals.
And Taylor had come back to work with Clough as well. And
so you know, it was great foresight, you know, to sign those quality type of players. I mean, I was surprised we got Archie Gemmell, really. Kenny Burns was one of those where, you know, 1 or 2 people said he was a troublemaker. He certainly caused trouble for the opposition centre forwards he played against in his first season in the First Division, because he won the Sports Writers Player of the Year, playing at centre half, and we signed him as a striker who'd got 20 goals the season before.
and
so
then he went to
centre
back, which you'd never hear of that now, ever.
I mean, when we signed Kenny Burns, you know, everybody went, we don't need a striker. And he played him straight at centre half. Yeah. And Kenny
another touch of genius, and
Kenny took to it like a duck to water. And I think he found, like myself, because when we won promotion, I played 2/3 of that season at centre half. And everybody went, you didn't play centre half, did you?
Yeah.
But I was playing alongside somebody called Larry Lloyd, you know, who was like a bungalow playing against a tenement building, you know what I mean? Larry was the tenement building that headed everything, and I just swept up and round about him, you know. So I you know, again, played in a different position for 3/4 of the season, managed to adapt and did okay. Yeah. But Kenny was outstanding. He found out he's got so much more time, and every time he's called into action, he can see the ball there,
right in front of him.
When you're a striker, they hit you from there, here, they hit you from all over the place. But I think he thrived in the situation where he's dishing out the physical stuff to the guys he's playing against, but he also has the finesse of a striker and the touch of a striker
to be able to play the ball out and,
you know, to go past players, which centre half that could go past players. I mean,
that was unheard of.
There wasn't that many that could do it in those days, you know.
No.
Franz Beckenbauer highlighted it, you know, as a German player more than anybody else in the game. Yeah. But Kenny could do it.
Yeah. When did you first become captain of Nottingham Forest? When was?
Well, it was in the second division days, where Sammy Chapman and Liam O'Kane, captain and vice captain, were both injured for a home match.
And we'd been out, done our normal warm up for the match. Came back in the dressing room with about 10 minutes to go before the kick-off time, and I can remember saying to Frank Clark, and I said, "Yeah, boss hasn't told us who's going to be captain." And Frank Clark said, "Well, you know, you're one of the most experienced players, you know, because you've worked for different jobs." He said, "You know, you should be captain." I said, "I'd never really thought about it. You know, because it's unusual that you get the captain and the vice captain and you should for the same game." And then Clough came in with Peter Taylor. That's normal. You know, 10 minutes before kick-off. Told the substitute, "Get Peter and I a whiskey and a cigar." You know, so whoever was subbing to court somewhere, bring back 2 cigars. And if you walk past Clough in the restaurant, you just blow smoke in your face, you know. So you hadn't said anything. And then started putting the cigars down, Clough started bouncing the ball, you know. And then all of a sudden, he looked at me and went, and threw it really fast. And I caught it, because I was actually watching him at the time, you know, just wondering what he was going to do. And I caught it, and he just said, "Well, you're good at catching balls, you can take the side out." That was it. So that's all he said.
Really? There was no, "I want you to be captain," or you just lobbed the ball at you and said, "Go on then, you can do it."
Threw it. I mean, I'm glad I caught it.
Yeah. Do you think he might have changed his mind if you dropped it?
Well, I'm just glad I caught it. And he made me captain, and I remained like that for the next 6 years, 7 years. So, again, you know, totally relaxed. If you think about the cigars and the whiskey before a match, never discuss the opposition, and then just says, "Come on, lads, 5, get them out." So that was our approach. There was no standing in front of players going, when they get the ball, I want you to, there was none of this. This is all tension, you know what I mean? Smoking a cigar and blowing smoke in your face. Yeah, this is totally relaxation.
So yeah, 6 years is a long time to be captain of a club that went on to achieve the unimaginable in the 1979 season and the 1980 season by winning back-to-back European Cups. Just talk to us about them 2 seasons in particular. How proud you must have felt as a captain, taking your team through that period of time and seeing you achieve that kind of success.
Well, obviously, I mean, first benefit is you get the cups first. But no, listen.
How do you feel in that kind of
privilege?
situation?
It's a privilege to be made captain, you know, especially when I'm playing with people like, you know, Peter Shilton and Archie Gemmill.
Had you been captain under Clough at any point? Was that the first time that he'd said
First time.
to you? Yeah.
You have to go back to my school days where I captained the cricket team and captained the rugby team, you know. I wanted to be captain in those days. But when it was a little bit of a surprise at Nottingham where you know, came out of the blue and you've already got a captain and a vice captain at the club. But then I'm made captain, but remained captain. So it is a privilege. It's an honour. One that I quite enjoyed. I used to call heads most of the time. And used to win most of the tosses with the coin in the middle.
But yeah.
You know, in cricket, a captain's more involved. You know, he'll talk with the selectors about the team and players. You know, not in football.
No.
Heads or tails. That's your responsibilities. And there is one other thing that I did forget, that I would speak to the referee or had the manager's permission to speak to the referee. In those days, none of the other players were allowed to talk back to the referee.
It was literally captain and
so that it kept it on a sensible level, because Clough knew that I wouldn't be, you know, throwing profanities at the referee every time he made a decision.
Losing your head.
And if it came to me asking regarding a decision, you know, whether it was a dubious one or not, he knew it would be done in the right way. So, you know, I mean, I remained captain because then we kept winning matches and leagues and cups, and it was just wonderful.
Snowball effect.
Yeah, well, yeah. Why would you change things, you know? And I was just pleased because I knew the ability that we had in the side. I mean, you know, people like Viv Anderson, Tony Woodcock, John Robertson, Ian Boyer and Martin O'Neill, who were there when I first came to Nottingham Forest, were a massive bonus for Clough and Taylor. You know, those 5 players, and I mean John Robertson especially, who ended up being the best player after Peter Taylor put him in a wide position.
Once again.
At Derby, he played me in a wide position, then put me in central midfield with John Robertson. It was the opposite. He went wide and it suited him down to the ground. So he's got 5 players there, and then, you know, the additions of people like Shilton, Archie Gemmill and Kenny. I mean, you know, this is adding quality to quality. Tony Woodcock up front. I mean, you know, Tony was, when I first came, you know, I said, who's that lad? To John Robertson, you know. He said, oh, it's Tony Woodcock, you know. Brian Clough's trying to sell him to Lincoln City. And I went, sell him? You know, and I was astounded, you know, that he was trying to sell him. And I think they offered 12,000 or something, and he wanted 15,000. You know, 3 years later, he's an international, you know, playing for England, you know. Yeah. So that was another example of, you knew that Peter Taylor was the recruitment officer, if you like, modern day term.
And every time Brian Clough and his teams experienced that kind of success, Taylor was always a part of that whole setup. And
yeah, everybody said, you know, did he do much talking in the dressing room? Well, no, he wouldn't, because Clough was so good at it. You let the
good
guy...
cop, bad cop, isn't it, really?
Well, it was kind of just a Clough cop, and, you know, Peter Taylor eventually threw an odd comment in. But if Clough was getting too serious with the players, and Peter Taylor would crack a joke.
Just do something to lighten the mood a little bit.
Correct. Yeah. And he was good at it. I mean, he was a funny guy. I mean, he was at his best when we play in Ajax of Amsterdam in the European Cup. I think it was the quarter-final. Might have been the quarter-final, might have been the semi-final anyway. So we're drawn against them and we win 2-0 at home. So we go over to Amsterdam for the second leg. And obviously the day before the match, you've got a leisurely day, and then there's the evening before the match.
Yeah.
And Peter Taylor, Brian Clough decided to take us down to the red light district on the river, which has got nice big glass windows where nice attractive ladies are there, you know, saying hello to you as you walk past. And
very friendly.
Yeah, very friendly ladies. And then the absolute brilliant moment that Peter Taylor had was that he tried to negotiate with one of the guys on the door of a brothel for us to get a team discount. And he's saying to the guy, look, he'll only be 10 minutes. 10 minutes. He said he should get a discount for him, and a discount for you know. And this is Peter Taylor at his best, you know. No, we never went inside.
Cigar on, kind of.
We never went inside the brothel, you know what I mean? But we stood there and couldn't stop laughing, you know. Peter Taylor's negotiating with this guy for a team discount to go in the brothel.
Brilliant.
I mean, absolutely superb. So you know, we ended up actually, we lost 1-0 that night, you know, but we got through.
Because you'd won 2-0 at home.
So, and it was just a real comical moment. I mean, that was Peter Taylor at his best.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, when people talk about you playing cup semi-finals or cup finals and everything, that, you know, there must be a lot of tension and things like that, you know. But we used to come in training every day, and there'd be laughs every day, you know, and you'd look forward to the next match, and it's such a positive time for both the players as individuals and as a team, that, you know, and
the city as well.
That, well, everyone's happy.
Yeah.
You know, even in modern day football, you know, if your team's winning football matches, everybody will be happy. The supporters will be happy. You know what I mean?
And you must notice it at the moment with Nottingham, with how they've performed so far this season.
Well, I have the privilege of being able to go down and watch the first team players train at the request of Steve Cooper, the manager.
Yeah.
And the players are what I call at it all the time. The training's, you know, there's laughing and joking in the training, but there's also full-blooded tackles going in when they're having a small five-a-side, which used to happen when I played. And you get a little bit of a reminder of, like, this is fun. You're doing your job to the best of your ability. You're doing it in a very, very professional manner, but you can still have a laugh and a joke.
I think some of the best times, obviously I've never been a professional footballer, but football is fun. Like, played hours upon hours upon hours with friends at 15 years old, where all you needed was a football.
It is fun if you win, though.
Oh yeah, there is that as well.
When you become a professional, you know, you have to try and win.
Yeah.
And obviously there are times when you're gonna be disappointed.
Yeah.
And there'll be times like, you know, we've played 3 consecutive League Cup finals and we lost one of them. And actually a former Forest player was the manager of the side at the time at Wembley. So we lost a final at Wembley, and it's not a nice place to lose a match, but there's always a next match. You know, John Barnwell was the ex-Forest player that was manager of Wolves when they beat us 1-0 at Wembley. And it was a mistake between 2 of our players that presented them with a tap-in, which was disappointing. The opposition didn't beat us, we beat ourselves by a horrific not an own goal, but
a mix-up or...
Yeah, but when you consider the success side compared to that odd hiccup, then, you know, it's a magnificent feeling.
Yeah.
Supporters, as you said, you know, they just strut about a little bit when your team is winning.
Of course. And luckily for yourself, you never lost the European Cup final. Both times that you...
No. The only thing I regret was that the first League Cup final, when we drew with Liverpool and then won the replay at Old Trafford, 1-0 courtesy of a John Robertson penalty. I was injured in the first game, so I didn't receive the cup first. Kenny Burns did. So I had to I had to sit in the stands and shout and cheer at the end of the match
Yeah.
when we'd won the cup. I was in the stands. I wasn't anywhere near the pitch.
No.
If you're not fit to play or you're not playing, Brian Clough doesn't want you near the rest of the players. So I had to cheer, and then strangely enough, when I was going to receive the league championship trophy in a home match, there was a doubt about my fitness, and Brian Clough said to me, if you're not fit, you're not playing in the game, which meant I would have lost out on getting the League Cup, which was the first major honour that Forest had won, while Clough and Taylor had been there. Then I would miss out receiving the league championship. But I actually told him I was fit, and I wasn't. So I told him a little lie, just so that I was out there and received the league championship. You know, I don't lie as a rule. That was a little
white lie.
A little white lie. Yeah, we'll put it as a white lie.
Yeah. Best moment that you've experienced as a football player?
In a football sense, it was receiving that league championship trophy as captain at Nottingham Forest. Because European Cups, you can be lucky and get through a round of the European Cup. But when you play the 9 months of a football league season and play 42 games and you're top of your league, then you're the best team in the country.
Are we, as Derby fans, allowed to tell Forest fans that we've won 2 league titles and they've only won 1?
You are.
And that's a bigger achievement than 2 European Cups?
Well, the Nottingham Forest fans will tell you it's actually a bigger achievement if you win 2 European Cups. but that's fans, you see.
Yeah.
Competitive. It's competitive. Football's competitive. But
you spend a lot of your time now as an ambassador for Nottingham Forest. You had a stint as a manager and
I had a few managerial positions. And wasn't as persuasive as Brian Clough to be given some money to buy players. I usually had to just sell them as soon as I arrived at a football club. So I had a spell at Bolton Wanderers, I had a spell at Rotherham with Archie Gemmell, I had a spell at Plymouth with Peter Shilton. So after a few years I realised this, unless you get a job in a club that's going to back you with a little bit of finance, you're not going to achieve anything. At Plymouth we did. We got actually in the playoffs at Plymouth when the chairman allowed us, some money to buy some players, and it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, at Rotherham we won a minor trophy called the Auto Windscreen Shield, and people said, "Oh, it's a nothing tournament," And I said, "Listen, it's played at Wembley."
Yeah.
So don't tell me it's a nothing tournament when they played at Wembley. Our average league.
I can imagine you remember the Watney Cup final and.
Yeah. Well, the Auto Windscreen Shield when I was at Rotherham with Archie Gemmell, average league gate was about 5,500. We sold 18,000 tickets. You tell the 18,000 Rotherham fans it's a nothing tournament. They went to Wembley and they won.
Yeah.
And they will carry that with them for the rest of their lives, because it's a great place to win a match. Not a good place to lose one, but the Rotherham fans will remember that.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
Yeah. Paul Warne at Derby County, he was Rotherham's manager for 6 seasons. Are you a fan of what you're seeing as an outsider there? Or?
At Derby County, sorry.
So Paul Warne, who's Derby County manager,
yeah.
He was Rotherham manager for 6 seasons.
Yeah.
He got them promoted 3 times, relegated 3 times to the Championship. Do you still keep up with Derby County's?
I look for the result.
Yeah.
Same as I look for a result at Hartlepool.
Mm-hmm.
The clubs I was involved with.
Yeah.
Bolton. You always, I think, have a little bit of affection if you were as fortunate as I was in your football career. So look back at the clubs you were at and thought, yeah, let's have a look and see what their result was.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I don't think that'll change either. Usually you get fans that support one club and they're diehards, and then their kids grow up and they become fans, and it runs through generations.
Yeah.
Which is a great thing, that loyalty, and football clubs are very appreciative of it, because the costs of going to matches now, compared to when I was a player,
Football's changed a bit, hasn't it?
are phenomenal. Well,
Yeah.
we've got a thing called satellite television, that nobody could foresee changing the game as much as it has.
Mm-hmm.
and given players riches that they never ever could have earned, certainly not in my playing day. You had to be an individual sportsman of world quality to be a millionaire. But it's not that difficult to do that in football now if you're a successful player.
Not all of them have 2 European Cup winners medals, though.
Or an unsuccessful player.
Well, this is it, yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I lived the dream. I was one of the fortunate ones, but at least I had that appreciation of it, and always will.
Yeah. John, just want to say thank you on behalf of anybody that's a Derby County or Forest for what you gave to both clubs. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to sit down with you and to hear some of the stories.
Well, all I can say is I did try my best.
God bless you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.